Hi, how's it going? I hope that you're doing wonderful. I'm okay. And in this video, I want us to go through the banking system and how the banking system emerged and how it works and how it interacts in the financial system, with the monetary system, and with the whole economy. So the banking system is the most important thing for a person to understand. If you're in business, if you're in trading, if you're in finance, if you're in school, if you're in college, if you're working, if you're not, you need to understand how money flows and how money goes around, because everybody needs to use money, right? So you need to be able to know this and to understand it. And if you feel like the information in this video is helpful to you, I do encourage you to share it with someone or something like that, if you can. All right, cool. So I've already spoken about the monetary system in a separate video. So you can just take a look at that video and familiarize yourself with what I was talking about, because some of the things that I was saying are a bit different, right? So how we understand the banking system will tie in with how you really understand the monetary system, because banks are developed or designed to handle money. This is all they do. They are developed to handle money. And the banking system is comprised of people who direct the flow of the currency. So a current is the movement of the water in a river, and the banks are on the side of this river and they direct that flow. This is what the banks do. They direct the flow of the currency. So they direct the purchasing power of the whole entire economy. So banks started with goldsmiths. So money starts with gold. Banks start with goldsmiths. So the goldsmiths used to keep people's gold, and then they discovered that the people who used to leave their gold with them will not come and get all of their gold at the same time, while they knew other people who needed gold. Come on, who doesn't want gold? So then they were able to get some people they were able to loan out the gold that belongs to other people, while the other people hadn't come back to get their gold. So this is how banking emerged. So these goldsmiths started issuing out receipts to people who gave them gold to keep safe for them. So you'd go to a goldsmith, and then you'd give him your money, your gold. That is money. Yeah, you'd give him your money, and then he gives you a receipt, which is not money, which is just a receipt that shows the ownership of money in a bank. And this is the original gold standard. And money used to be just like that. That the bank used to keep money in a vault, used to keep gold in a vault. And when you take that paper to the bank, they're supposed to give you back your gold. And that doesn't happen anymore, because the countries are not able to maintain that much gold in their banks, because they just can't. Well, they can't because they need to finance wars, they need to finance policies, they need to finance politics and all of that stuff. But gold was the original money, and it still is the original money. So the banking system started with the goldsmiths because they were manipulating the gold standard. So this was actually termed fractional reserve banking. So they would keep a fraction of the reserves, and then they'll start banking, directing the cash flow. So right now we have different types of banks. The banking world is huge today, but four of the top, the biggest banks in the world right now, four of them, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4 are all Chinese. Number 5 is Japanese. Number 6 is American. And so China has the biggest banks in the world right now, and they also have the biggest gold reserves in the world, or they're accumulating gold. They've been buying gold like crazy for the past couple of years. So China and Russia have been hoarding gold, and they have the biggest banks in China and in Japan. So Asia has the biggest banks in the world. So there are so many different types of banks that we have. So we have investment banks. So these banks they are usually just geared towards people with a lot of money. So they invest in different companies. They also do some trading. They do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, mergers and acquisitions, some trades, some transactions, some foreign exchanges, and things like that. And then we also have commercial banks, and these are the banks that we see every day, like Standard Chartered, Barclays. They do a lot of retail banking, which is commercial banking. So the retail banks are the ones that we interact with a lot. And then we also have savings banks, which are the same as commercial banks, but they have just a couple of tweaks here and there. In some countries, you have postal banks, which use the postal services and things like that. And nowadays, you're seeing internet banks, some internet-only banks. So there are also banks like that. So all of these banks are different, and in their own right, they have their own customers which they serve. But the most important type of bank is actually called a central bank. So a central bank directs the liquidity of the commercial banks and investment banks and merchant banks in a certain country. So merchant banks are just the same as investment banks, depending on which country. So the central bank is the most important bank because of a word called liquidity. So liquidity means cash flow. So liquidity is the monetary base and how the central bank directs the money in a certain place, in a certain system. So the most important reserve bank or central bank is actually the central bank in the United States, which is called the Federal Reserve Bank. So the Federal Reserve Bank has a Federal Reserve System. So the Federal Reserve System is very interesting. And the Federal Reserve System is what ties the whole world together, because the whole world is backed by the US dollar. So if the US dollar tanks today, the whole world tanks with it, and that's how it's all set up. So basically, we have one central bank, which is the Reserve Bank, and this is not really a bank in the strict sense of the word, because you can't go and deposit your money in a central reserve. But they are regulators, which means that they regulate all the other banks in their Federal Reserve System. So in America, they have 12 different banks and one main bank in Washington. So they have 12 different regions. Reminds me of something, reminds me of the story of Jesus. But then they have 12 different banks, and then they have the one in Washington. And all of the other banks just listen to them. And then in that reserve system, the one in New York does the executes the account on behalf of them in what they call open market operations. So these open market operations are when the bank buys and sells bonds. So this bank basically trades bonds. That's all it does. It trades bonds in order to, right, in the open market operations, that's all it does. But it does a lot more. Some of the stuff we're not really sure about, but what we can see is that they just direct the biggest economy in the world, and this inadvertently affects each and every other country in the world. So this is a very key issue and a key task. And if you understand the power of money and the power of economy and the power of the United States, then you know how big of a task this is for the United States, for Jerome Powell, who's the chairman right now, for everyone else. So this is a very important task that they have. So in the Federal Reserve System, that's just how it works. So they create and expand the monetary base and the monetary supply of basically the entire world, because their actions affect everybody else. So the banking system is a system that was actually founded, that was formalized in Italy. So the biggest banks, or not the biggest banks, but the oldest banks, the first banks, the prime banks were founded in Italy. So if you've heard of the Medicis and some of those people, the Fazzutis. Alright, my Italian is horrible, but the prime banks were Italian banks. So these banks are where the whole banking system emerged in during the Renaissance, which is very, very interesting. So this is why art is related to banking. So this is why the money is so artistic. So to create money is actually an art, and that's my stance, and I'm sticking with it because there's so much about money that is linked with finance. Even right now, the people who can afford all of that expensive art are bankers. Why? It's funny, but in that time, the people who actually paid for those artworks are bankers. So the people who paid for those artworks are bankers and popes. Interesting, but we'll get into that in a second. So the oldest banks are Italian banks, and that spread out after the Renaissance. And in the Renaissance, this was the age of enlightenment, right? And this is when all of these ideas started emerging. So banking is essentially an idea. So this idea is what we still have. So modern day, just fast forwarding through all of that history, just bringing it back to modern day for the sake of brevity. We have the Federal Reserve today, and the Federal Reserve directs the affairs, directs the currency of the water flow, right? So in everything that the Federal Reserve is doing, it is doing this for the sake of the economy, right? So the Federal Reserve will control deposit rates, will control the percentage of your loan rates. It will do this directly or indirectly, and it will control the interest rates. It will put more money into the system, take more money out of the system, and does that stuff. However, we're supposed to be in a free market, in an open market. So it means that the Federal Reserve is not supposed to be doing that in terms of what the market, the capitalist society is supposed to be, just an open market with no interference. But however, they actually do, because if the exchange rates are actually just floating, they're supposed to be freely floating, but they're not freely floating. They're manipulated. They're influenced. So to influence is to do something, to do something like in fluid, like water. So everything that happens in the banking system is just like water, so slick and so effortless, so smooth at the same time. So so when we look at the banking system, we are looking at, we're looking at a hydrological system, hydro. So we could say that it's hydropower. So it's hydropower because water, which is a currency, produces what we call electricity, and this electricity is where we get purchasing power, right? And if you look at the wording in the documents or in the banking industry, we say that there was a market shock. Shocking. Interesting. So these shocks happen because it's electrical shocks. So these circuits need to always be moving in a way that is systematic, or else if a positive and a negative touch, then that's a shock and the circuit could just blow up. So we don't want these shocks to happen, but we want this to be monitored. All right. And more so, when we look at the words that we use in this banking, so this is an entire lexicon that we say that you withdraw money, which is to take money out, right? The same way that, so in the same way that you draw water from a well, like you make a withdrawal, and in the same way that you go and you can deposit money. So the money is deposited in a bank, just like how a river has a river deposit. So when the water is flowing, it carries some things with it, and that stuff is what we call a deposit once it's deposited at the river bed. So this bed is the deposit of the river. So this is actually how you make a deposit and how you make a withdrawal, And this is how it works within the banking system. And the bank is just the side of the river, the side of the current, where you can have the opportunity to make a withdrawal. So you have the deposit, which is when you put the money in. You have a deposit in a river, which is when something falls on the riverbed or is deposited in the riverbed. And you have a withdrawal, which is when you draw water from a well. And this is just how it works. And to even take it a little bit further, we have a Federal Reserve, and then this reserve is a reservoir. So this reservoir is where we keep the money, so that whatever happens, we know that we're always okay, because the money is always in the reserve. So we look at the previous crash that happened, that people had to be bailed out because there was no liquidity in the economy. So we went to the central reservoir to get some more liquidity, and they just put a lot of liquidity into the whole system so that we could get the cash flowing again. So we had the cash flow. So what banks do is basically they create this liquidity in the system, because everything in the system needs to have this liquidity, needs to have this cash flow. So tying it back to what we were saying about the oldest bank. The oldest bank right now is actually an Italian bank, which was formed in 1492, thereabout. So far. So it's traced back to the roots of 1492, and it was established some couple of years later. But it's one of the first banks, the oldest banks, that's still actually surviving and still operating today. I think it's the third or fourth largest bank in Italy at the moment. It's a commercial bank, so it does transactions with everything. So it's actually seen everything that's happened. And the different central banks have been formed in different countries. So to say that the United States has the most important central bank just means that it is the key central bank, but it is by no means the only central bank in the world. As a matter of fact, each country has its own central bank or its own institutions that create its money and does all of these things, creates the liquidity in the country and the interest rates, and monitors all other banks for the sake of the entire economy. So when we look at banking, well, what we're looking at is a system that creates liquidity, and that keeps people from drowning and keeps there from being a drought. So it's its own it's an entire ecosystem. So every bank has this duty, and more so every central bank has this duty. So all of the things that are happening are tied in to whatever we experience and whatever we see as banking. So this purchasing power is created through the banks because of the current, which is just a circuit. So this is why in our society, when you go and buy things, when you use money, every time you use money, you are charged for a certain thing. The price is the charge. And in everything else that you're actually doing, you have the opportunity to get charged, right? And the same thing happens in all other facets of life, that if a person goes to court, actually they're being charged for something, because the bank actually just means banco, which is a bench, and the same thing is a judge. A judge is a bench. So a judge is a banker. So this is why they have the same mechanics, because a courtroom is actually a boat, but that's something else. So with the bank, all of the banks are on the currency, right? On the current, which means that they are supposed to create liquidity. But for there to be sanity in this whole thing, it means that people have to be able to float on top of this liquidity thing. So people are creating all of these investments, and some of the funds are sinking funds, some of the funds are floating funds, and this is why we say like, what is your balance? Because you have to balance the actual float of money. You say that, what is the float? So all of these are financial terms, but all of these are geographic, ecologic terms, and all of that. So when we talk about banks, we started talking about the goldsmiths. So the goldsmiths used to get people's capital. So this capital was the actual gold. So the capital is the money that the banks have. So the primary business of a bank is loaning. So when a bank creates a loan, it's created an asset for itself, which is a liability for everybody else. And this is why people don't like banks, because their loans are assets to them, but their liabilities to everybody else. We have this whole issue that those banks just create their profit from everyone else's misery. And for example, we have mortgages, and the word mortgages actually just has morgue in it because it means a debt until death, and debt actually means death. So this is why banks are they're not everybody's favorite institution just because of that, because everything that they do is in a way so self-serving and so selfish. But on the other hand, they actually do perform a duty that is important in the world that we live in. Although something like Bitcoin, which is why it's so sensationalized, is something that shows us an alternative way, but it's not something that's gonna last. It's just a temporary sunshine, but it's something that's really going to be thwarted from what I can see. But the banks show us how we can just transfer and have monetary communication from different parts of the world, and this is beneficial to some extent, regardless of where you live in the world. And everything that is happening, they are getting paid through charges. And this charges means that we have to be discharged. So it discharges someone else's power, and then it charges that. And to make it worse, whatever these banks call money is something that they just say. They just decree that it is money. So they create a document, and then this document is the dogma that is in force. So this document creates a certain doctrine. So all of the banks have a certain doctrine. So this is why every note is just a document that you get. So this document is what you take with you to wherever you are going as a receipt. And every person is traveling as a vessel. You are a vessel, and this vessel is on the water. So this whole planet is made of water, 3/4 water, just like the whole body is made of water, 3/4 water. Like, you can't see this, but this is all just H2O, and this is just how everything works. This is how they liquidate. They create liquidity, and you can say that the assets are frozen. How do they freeze? When do they freeze? Because it's all liquid. So when you have a boat, it is afloat. And when you have capital, you have capital. And capital is the basis of all business in a capitalist society. Capitalist. And we live in a capitalist society, and this is how these banks are formed. So in this capitalist society, we have this capital, and through this capital, we have a captain, because everyone is a vessel. So we have a captain, and we're just navigating, because everyone has a naval. So you're navigating your life. So don't let the banks control your life, because you are the captain of your ship, of your capital. This is what we call human capital. So we lose that through not knowing. So you have to realize that you are a person who is in charge of your whole entire life and your whole destiny. Destination. Why? Because you're navigating. Why? Because you are the captain. Why? Because you're the water, on water, moving with water, as water. So everything ties into that. You are a person who is a spirit, and whatever is happening in your life, you are in control of it. The banking system is created by people so that they can so that they can control everyone else through controlling their desires. So money is something that everyone needs. So you can't escape that fact. The fact that these banks are creating money, and the fact that they are not the most they're not the most upright people in the world, doesn't mean that you're supposed to forsake money, because you're still gonna need it. You're still gonna need money to do whatever you need to do. You're still gonna have to use money. So how are you gonna navigate through that? This is the question. So you have to be able to customize your life through knowing this. Knowledge is power. My people perish from a lack of knowledge. The only reason why I'm talking about this, and talking about some of these things that are pretty hard to digest for some people, is because this is the truth. And it's interesting to me. And if you find this interesting, if you're actually watching this for this long, it means that you find it interesting. So it means that there's something that you can do about this, and everything is within your power and within your reach. So everything is permitted by God, and you are God. So if you are gonna subjugate yourself to this, then you are permitting it. Unless if you want to do something about it and create your own infrastructure and build your own business, and don't answer to whatever this is. This money stuff, it's just made up. It's made up stuff, and it's just created so that people can control the masses. So in so doing, you're being controlled if you do not take control, because your compliance is your ignorance. Just being ignorant of these principles, of these factors, will mean that you're compliant to it. Whatever happens, you don't have an excuse, especially after watching this. So if we find ourselves in this type of situation, so what should we do about it? So I think the only thing that anyone can do about it the only thing that anyone can actually do about something like this is to be the master of your own fate, and to start doing whatever you can do within your power, within your reach, within your reason, within your means, to be free of these systems, and to start channeling your power, directing your own power through your own ways. You see, like when you go to a bank, they say that these are the banking channels that you can follow. They say this stuff because all of these different branches are just different tributaries, and these different banking channels are just how they channel your money. So you have to see, and these are just river channels or canals, because these are man-made, so they're just canals, and then these canals or these channels are how they just get the money. So when they do this, they're just channeling your energy, siphoning your energy, draining your energy. The banks need water because we are made of water. The whole planet is made of water. So this is why they want you to just drift along with them, just drifting with them, not knowing that you have the power to create whatever you want to create and do whatever you want to do, and to be free of this system. And if freedom to you means that you have $20 a day through doing a legitimate business that's not going to get you in trouble, that's not going to get you charged for it, because these banks are just charging you. You're charged for every transaction, charging. So you just need to be free. Drop the charges. Drop the charges, okay? Just to be free so that you can do whatever you want to do, whatever you have in your heart to do. So, so do this and sing your own music and create your own life, create your own legacy in freedom. So the first place is the mind. So you need to have the freedom of mind so that you can have a life of purpose. So if your mind is going to be freed by this, then God bless. But if you still need some more help, if you want to do something, just go for it and see what the result is. Because at the end of the day, you really have nothing to lose because you are on the water. And this document, this water document, is what you're going to use at the dock to dock in your ship. So this is what all documents are there for. So they tell us a certain doctrine, but this doctrine is doctored. So to doctor is to fix something, like a spin doctor. So they doctor the everything. It's just doctored, so that you follow a certain doctrine, a certain dogma. But you have to know what you want and go for it. And yeah, so I'm not gonna make this longer than it has to be. But whatever happens, you are in control, and this whole system is created for your benefit at the end of the day. It's created in your ignorance, right? But it's meant to liberate you if you know how it works. So now you know about how it works and now you can navigate through it. You are also water, so no one is gonna claim your right unless if you don't claim it for yourself, because your competence is just your idea, your understanding, and your faith. That is what competence is. So the more knowledge you have, the more competence you're building, and the more that you can actually achieve. So I just hope that this speaks to you on a deep level, on a heavy level, so that you can actually get whatever you want out of life, and that you can be free of all of this stuff and that you can just be liberated in everything that you do. And I wish the same for you, for me, for whoever who sees this. So thanks a lot, and I'll see you soon.